Falling in love can feel like diving headfirst into water. The plunge is exhilarating. The rush overwhelms you. Nothing else matters. But if you're not careful, you can get caught up in the current. Soon you don't know which way is up. You struggle for air and fight like hell until your very last breath. New Orleans, Louisiana. It's here that the muddy Mississippi River snakes its way into the salty brine of the Gulf of Mexico, where boats and barges begin their journey to busy ports. This intracoastal waterway often looks calm, peaceful, but looks can be deceiving.
The call to 911 came in from a man who was using the intercoastal.
New Orleans police operator 227, where is the emergency?
Yes, I was headed westbound to the intercoastal waterway. I'm on the boat, or somebody that's dead person in the water. They floating face down.
Are you gonna be there?
Yes, I'm standing up looking at it here.
The New Orleans Police Department responds to the call.
When I arrived, I couldn't get any notion of how the body died. My initial thought was it could be a natural or it could have been a suicide. We rolled it and we were able to determine it was a female.
One clue immediately reveals to police a sinister story.
She was bound. We found some blue rope wrapped around her ankles, and it was frayed off like there was some kind of object next to it.
But who is this woman, and who would want her dead?
It was absolutely atrocious. So you have to think that this is some form of retaliation. We don't know the depth of what's actually going on.
This scene was challenging. I had no idea who my victim was. I don't know where the body went in the water at. I didn't even know the manner of death, but I felt like I was definitely working a homicide.
Though police have little to go on, news of the unidentified woman's death ripples throughout the Crescent City and beyond.
Even in a city like New Orleans, where there's a lot of killings and a lot of murders, this one stood out for the gruesome nature.
About 70 miles northwest of New Orleans is St. Gabriel, Louisiana. The small town is home to local beauty Brittany Martin.
Brittany Martin was very outgoing, did well in school. Then after graduation, she attempted to receive a higher education degree. But by the time she enrolled in Delgado Community College, she was pregnant.
The baby derailed some of her education plans.
With her baby's father no longer in the picture, Brittany took the role of single mom in stride, working temp jobs to make ends meet. But Brittany craved something more stable.
Brittany Martin, at age 21, started working as a prison guard.
Being a corrections officer presented to her financial stability, which she needed at that time because she now had a child to raise.
Brittany's primary duty was inmate supervision.
She was actually responsible for monitoring the interactions of the inmates, make sure that they were following protocol, that it was a calm environment, there was no inappropriate activities going on.
Though the job gave Brittany a regular paycheck, it also presented a slew of unexpected challenges.
Brittany is very, very attractive. She has those features that would draw a man's attention to her.
To be a 21-year-old prison guard, a woman in an institution filled with men, she's the center of attention, obviously, for lots and lots of inmates.
There was sexual harassment and the psychological distress from having to be in that working environment on a day-to-day basis.
However, there was one inmate, a man named Horatio Johnson, who went out of his way to make sure Brittany felt safe.
Horatio was serving a sentence but was held in very high regard. And so he was also a protective barrier for her against any of the other inmates. She was not getting the cat calls, the threats.
He was very smart. He was a very good-looking individual. He's very charismatic.
He didn't come off as your average criminal or what we want to think about as your average criminal.
But underneath Horatio's charm was a man with a vicious criminal history.
He had gone to prison for manslaughter. The facts of that case are disturbing.
Horatio waited for somebody to come in the area, and he jumped out, shot him in the face with a shotgun.
Despite Horatio's history of violence, Brittany soon developed feelings for him.
Small talk develops into conversation. You're getting to know them, they're getting to know you, and then the longer you're there, the stronger those bonds become. It makes you feel good, and it makes you want to like them back.
Eventually, prison officials caught on that there was something going on with the two of them, that there was an illicit relationship taking place.
They found letters and pictures in Mr. Johnson's possession from her to him. And she was given the opportunity to resign without having to go through administrative process.
Brittany may have quit her job at the prison, but her feelings for Horatio only grew stronger.
Brittany planned her future with him, saw him as the man that she wanted to help raise her son and to have her own family with, and a house and a white picket fence.
She adored him. He made her feel good about herself.
She was in love with Horatio. She was head over heels over this guy.
When Horatio was paroled 4 months later, Brittany was right there waiting for him.
Horatio looks like the kind of kid that you take home to mama.
He was someone who seemed to be well educated, seemed to be very business savvy.
Brittany believed she and Horatio would be together forever. But little did she know, her fairy tale romance wouldn't have a happy ending. March 10th, 2014. New Orleans detectives have recovered the body of a woman from the Intracoastal Waterway.
We didn't know if the victim had been stabbed, shot, strangled. This was the first time I ever dealt with a homicide investigation where the manner of death wasn't shooting or immediately known on scene.
The body had been bound with nylon rope, which appeared to be frayed at the bottom, as if something heavy had been attached and torn loose.
Who is this woman, and how did she end up dead? As they examine the body, detectives come up with their first real break in the case. One that will ultimately reveal just how far Brittany Martin would go to prove her love for Horatio.
While we were inspecting the body, we noted that there was a tattoo on the lower back of the victim. Now I at least had an avenue to go down.
Brittany Martin is a young mother who followed her heart and got swept up in a taboo romance, sacrificing her career as a prison guard in order to be with a handsome inmate named Horatio Johnson.
Brittany was just in love with him. She was willing to sacrifice everything.
Brittany was so in love with Horatio and had planned her future with him.
Once Brittany's man was paroled, the two started a life together in Laplace, Louisiana, just outside New Orleans.
She thought, oh, we were going to be in love and get married, but there was something that none of us could ever anticipate.
Not far from Laplace, New Orleans detectives are investigating the death of a woman whose submerged body has just been pulled from the Intracoastal Waterway.
It was a very, very gruesome discovery.
Couldn't tell who my victim was. I was overwhelmed, to say the least.
But police catch a break when they examine the body.
We flipped the body, trying to look for any defects or any signs of evidence. We noted a tattoo had some version of the word kin in it.
Detectives suspect the woman may be one half of a local married couple that disappeared 3 weeks earlier.
Kenneth and Lakeitha Joseph were married with no children. They lived in a suburb of New Orleans. They were reported missing on February 19th, 2014.
So I immediately reached out to the investigator that's handling that missing persons investigation. They had confirmed that Lakeitha Joseph, the female of the missing couple, had a lower back tattoo of Kin Kin.
Shortly after detectives ID Lakeitha Joseph, the coroner supplies them with the cause of death.
When the pathologist ruled out any signs of strangulation, and there were no bullet wounds or stab wounds, the pathologist ruled it as a homicide by drowning.
That same day, investigators reach out to Lakeitha's family and share the devastating news.
I learned that Lakeitha had once been in the military, but left because she was afraid of water, didn't know how to swim.
A fact which makes Lakeitha's death all the more horrific.
Water is going into your nose, into your lungs. It's absolutely torture. No one should have to die that way.
And neither of Lakeitha's parents can imagine who would have wanted to hurt their beloved daughter.
Kenneth and Lakeitha were close with their loved ones. At no time did Kenneth nor Lakeitha tell their families about any problems or beefs that they were having.
In fact, Lakeitha and Kenneth were inseparable. So where is her other half?
The Josephs were reported missing by family members who became concerned because they had borrowed a van that they had not returned, which was very unusual for them.
Back at the station, detectives turned their attention to the van that Lakeitha and Kenneth borrowed but never returned.
The van pops up in Atlanta at a motel parking lot, and they got with Atlanta police to process this vehicle for blood evidence, DNA, anything they could find.
The van had been cleaned prior to it being discovered, but they noted that a large area of blood or suspected blood in the back of the van.
The blood tested out to be a mixture of both Kenneth and Lakeitha, so they knew that the couple had been transported in this van at some point and certainly had been injured.
It's looking more and more like Kenneth Joseph may also be dead.
After this van was recovered, detectives were able to find surveillance video from this motel.
At some point in the video, he sees the van enter the motel parking lot, and a male comes in to check in at the hotel.
Detectives cross-reference the time and date the van entered the parking lot with the hotel's check-in records. One name appears.
I came up with the name Frank Mike Jr. as the person that was driving the van.
They immediately run the name through their system.
Frank Mike had a series of arrests and run-ins. He was actually on probation at the time for drug dealing.
We found out that Frank Mike has a house in New Orleans East.
But before detectives can make contact with Frank Mike Jr., another body is found floating in the intracoastal waterway.
It's a male, it's face down, from the chest to the head, it's floating, and the rest of the body is down, and it seems to have been in the water a mighty long time, so it might be the man that they've been looking for.
I was able to view the body size, and the height and weight and all that seemed similar to Kenneth, so I was fairly confident.
Detectives confirmed the second body is in fact Kenneth Joseph.
Kenneth Joseph's body also is bound with the same blue nylon rope.
But the real mystery is just beginning. And what detectives find tethered to the rope reveals the true nature of the crime.
It was very clearly apparent that there were so many steps that had been taken to conceal the bodies.
But police will soon make another equally shocking discovery. The identity of the killer and the seemingly kind-hearted working mom at the center of it all.
Outside looking in, she does not appear to be a criminal, but looks can be deceiving.
Around the time she began to date Horatio, Brittany became very distant from her family and was leading a double life. She had her life with Horatio, And then she had her life with her family, who was not that welcoming and didn't think that he was good for her to begin with. And so because of that, she drew closer and closer to him and further away from a family that she had been close to prior to being in a relationship with him.
"25-year-old former prison guard Brittany Martin found the man of her dreams in recently paroled felon Horatio Johnson.
Brittany was very, very madly in love with Horatio Johnson.
But the true nature of Brittany and Horatio's romance is about to be revealed, along with the gruesome lengths Brittany was willing to go to in order to prove her love for him. It starts when investigators recover Kenneth Joseph's battered body from the same murky waterway where his wife Lakeitha was found 12 days earlier.
This murder definitely stood out as an unusual kind of story, just for the very brutal nature of the killings, the mystery of what had happened to this couple, who possibly could have done this to them, and why they would do it in this manner.
As they look over the body, police learn why they didn't find Kenneth sooner.
His feet were bound with blue rope, same as Lakeitha, same style, same color, same texture of rope. But his body was tied to a 35-pound kettlebell.
We pretty much ascertained that Lakeitha most likely had one also, and it frayed off in the water, and we pretty much figured those kettlebells used to weigh the bodies down so they would be undiscoverable by police.
It appeared to police that this was a very personalized kind of killing. Both people were still alive when they were actually dumped into the water.
With Kenneth's body now identified, detectives turn their attention to Frank Mike Jr., the man spotted in surveillance footage driving the van that the Josephs borrowed the night they disappeared.
I met with Frank Mike. He had come down on his own accord and agreed to meet with me.
You're doing the right thing by coming to us. I'm telling you that right now.
Frank Mike Jr. is surprisingly open with detectives.
I'm telling you, I went over to cut my grass, and the van was there.
He essentially tells me that he knew that there was a van parked in the backyard. He didn't know who the van belonged to, he thought it was strange, but he immediately knew to call his nephew, Stephen Bradley.
Called me, I'm like, what's up with that van, dude? He's like, oh man, you know, we pulled something off.
Stephen Bradley told Frank Mike we'd pulled off a little move in this van that meant that they'd either robbed somebody or something had happened.
Mike knew his nephew was involved in armed robberies and things of that nature, so he didn't ask any further questions.
Stephen said they had to get rid of this van and get it out of New Orleans.
Frank asked Bradley if he could use the van because he had an upcoming trip to go to Atlanta, and Bradley gave him the okay.
I asked him to use it for the weekend, because I always go to Atlanta by first chance a while and watch it, and I sell the stuff.
Frank Mike Jr. tells detectives that it wasn't until he arrived in Atlanta that he realized the vehicle was related to the disappearance of Kenneth and Lakeitha Joseph.
I was flipping through the news, and this was on, and I was just looking at it. I was like, this can't be.
Frank says at that point, he decided to ditch the van.
That's it with me with the van. I wipe my fingerprints off.
The thing about the van is that the van's got blood all in the van.
Frank Mike claimed that he didn't know anything about there being blood in it.
Even though Frank Mike Jr.'s story doesn't entirely add up, police have another potential suspect to look into: Stephen Bradley.
I'm trying to locate Bradley, and I'm still trying to develop more information to go back at Frank Mike to kind of tear down his interview. So I'm at a standstill in my investigation.
In the meantime, detectives turn to the most disturbing piece of evidence: the kettlebell used to sink Kenneth Joseph's body.
I remember thinking that's going to be the key to this case.
Detectives were able to work backwards from that, basically find out where this particular weight was sold.
I felt like the kettlebell was fairly new and purchased around the time of the murders, so we go start looking at different retail shops in the area.
Investigators speak with store managers in the New Orleans area about their kettlebell stock, looking for a match. And they find one.
The manager runs a little SKU number. Goes, yeah, we had a sale. Show after midnight one night. What was sold? 2 kettlebells, gloves, blue rope. Our hearts like stop. Like, oh my God, this is it. This is the sale. I'm like, can you get video?
The manager sends over the store's surveillance footage for detectives to view.
Lo and behold, we see a couple, a male and female. They're in the self-checkout area, and they're purchasing all these items.
They purchased 2 35-pound kettlebells, 3 pairs of gloves, 2 pairs of men's shoes, 2 men's hoodies, and some cleaner, what we've referred to as the murder kit.
It's a jaw-dropping discovery, but not nearly as shocking as the name on the credit card used to purchase the so-called murder kit.
When they were able to further trace that purchase, it was signed with a credit card belonging to Brittany Martin.
Is Brittany Martin somehow involved in the murders of Kenneth and Lakeitha Joseph? Or has her credit card been stolen? When detectives pull Brittany's ID and take a closer look at the store's surveillance video, the answer becomes plain as day.
Surveillance video captured them walking in. And one of the things that struck me is she's smiling, and the look on her face is just such a look of love and admiration.
Detectives in New Orleans are investigating the murders of husband and wife Kenneth and Lakeitha Joseph. After tracing the purchase of the so-called murder kit, the kettlebells, blue rope, and other supplies to a local retail store, investigators have come across an unlikely new suspect.
When they were able to further trace that purchase, they found it was signed with a credit card belonging to Brittany Martin.
Why would this kind, warm-hearted mom be involved in such a heinous crime?
We do some research. Brittany Martin, she has no history, no criminal history, but this major transgression where she crossed the line and had this inappropriate contact with Horatio Johnson in jail.
Horatio Johnson had a lengthy, violent history.
It appeared that he simply was a bad guy, heinous, evil individual.
Detectives also discover that Horatio has a connection with the male victim.
Horatio Johnson and Kenneth Joseph were cousins.
Had Brittany's love for Horatio compelled her to help him commit not 1, but 2 murders? And what was the motive? On April 9th, detectives bring Brittany into the station for questioning.
I attempted to interview her. I explained to her I felt like she was in grave danger because I knew Horatio Johnson's history. And I knew that if he felt like she stood in his way from freedom or going to jail, that he would kill her too.
So at that point, she shuts them down.
Brittany opens her cell phone, claiming that she needs to speak to her attorney.
You can tell she's actually on the phone with Horatio.
It was pretty obvious that her loyalty really was with Horatio.
Between Brittany's phone call, the credit card purchase, and the surveillance video, police are fairly certain the 2 lovers are involved in the murders. But the evidence is purely circumstantial, and investigators are still unable to tie Brittany or Horatio to the blood-stained van.
Anything I said to her was just going to fall upon deaf ears, so she was free to go.
Once Brittany is released, detectives circle back to the stolen van and Stephen Bradley's connection to the case. Detectives eventually locate Stephen and bring him in for questioning.
Once we got to the interview room, he was willing to talk, and Bradley tells us that he knows Horatio Johnson. When was the last time you talked to Horatio?
Man, it's been a minute. Horatio know me from music. My reason for dealing with Horatio is to get heard.
Stephen Bradley was a struggling rapper trying to make it. Horatio was promoting him.
Bradley said that on this particular evening, Bradley was at a recording studio and Horatio showed up with the van.
He was like, man, I need to get rid of this van. So I'm like, man, what's the problem? Yeah, like, man, I just need to get rid of it. I said, don't worry about it, I got it.
Stephen Bradley tells investigators a man named Blue owned the recording studio, and the two of them drove the van to Frank Mike Jr.'s house.
Bradley said they noted what they suspected to be blood in the back of the van.
No, like real talk, like I know they had blood in there.
Was it on the roof, on the walls?
It was on the floor.
Detectives press Bradley for more information, but that's all he's willing to say.
I feel like he knew more about the bodies, but as the interview progressed, Bradley shut down. He wanted to speak with his attorney prior to giving up any more information, so at that point I had to terminate the interview.
Investigators are getting closer to solving this mystery, but they still don't understand how or why someone like Brittany Martin would be involved in a crime like this. Nor do they have enough evidence to make an arrest. That is, until an associate of Stephen Bradley's comes forward.
He tells me that he had a direct conversation with Bradley. Bradley more or less confessed.
Yeah, he said, I need to get this off my chest. And then he started telling me what happened. And I was like, I kept saying, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it.
According to the witness, Stephen said he was hanging out with Blue at the studio when Kenneth Joseph entered, accompanied by his cousin, Horatio.
He said that Horatio hit Kenneth with a chair, then placed the chair on top of Kenneth's throat, and then stood on a chair and then jumped onto his body.
He said Blue was just kind of standing there like Horatio was just, he was like an animal.
No reason was ever given. Bradley never said that they were asking him questions or yelling at them for any particular reason to give up information.
To know that you're dying at the hands of someone that you share blood with, I can't imagine that.
Investigators don't need a clear motive for an arrest warrant. They just need evidence. And thanks to the witness's statement, now they've got it.
At this point in the investigation, I elected to apply for an arrest warrant for both Brittany and Horatio for the crime of second-degree murder.
Based on witness statements, credit card receipts, and surveillance footage, investigators believe 25-year-old Brittany Martin and her boyfriend Horatio Johnson are responsible for the murders of Kenneth and Lakeitha Joseph.
From the store video overhead camera, you could see Horatio Johnson handling the kettlebell weights using the sleeve of his sweatshirt. He was being very careful not to leave any fingerprints even during the purchase, which looked very, very suspicious.
The receipt had been signed by Brittany Martin, who used her credit card.
Miss Martin's walking through the store as if it's another day. She looks like she's the happiest woman in the world.
I believe that she probably had a series of emotions while in that relationship with him. A part of her was afraid of him, but I think a part of it was she loved him. She was willing to do anything for him. He made her feel good about herself.
On May 6, 2014, nearly 2 months after the deaths of Kenneth and Lakeitha Joseph, police obtain arrest warrants for both Brittany and Horatio.
Once the arrest warrants were signed, Horatio and Brittany turned themselves in.
But even after turning themselves in, neither Brittany nor Horatio will speak to police.
Horatio, please don't make this more difficult than what it needs to be.
All right, so don't try to force me.
Can you call my son? Appreciate it.
Investigators allow the couple to reach out to their attorneys, but not before they collect their cell phones as evidence.
When you get into someone's phone, you get some deep details about what they're thinking. When I start seeing, months after the actual killings, messages of "I love you," "I can't wait to see you," things of that nature, I knew that Brittany Martin is going to be a difficult person. And everyone always thinks, go to the woman, she'll break first, but Brittany wasn't doing that.
With Brittany refusing to turn on Horatio, detectives decide to search the recording studio where Kenneth Joseph was allegedly attacked.
Unfortunately, when we went inside, the whole place had been remodeled.
Everything was cleaned up. There's no way this is a coincidence. So nothing was found in the studio that could further corroborate that story that something happened there.
Detectives attempt to find the studio's owner, the man known as Blue.
We had an arrest warrant for him, but we can't seem to find him. By all accounts, he left the country.
With Blue in the wind, detectives obtain an arrest warrant for Stephen Bradley. But like Brittany, Stephen refuses to play ball.
He said, I want to be able to go into jail holding my head high. I'm not a rat. He refused to speak.
I'm done talking, man. I'm done talking.
Police arrest Frank Mike Jr., who also stonewalls them.
Nobody was talking to the police. Not one person. Not Brittany, not Frank, not Stephen Bradley, not Horatio Johnson.
We knew we had a very difficult case. In order to be able to piece together what happened and be able to prove our case beyond a reasonable doubt, we needed somebody from the inside.
That's when detectives come up with a plan they hope will turn Brittany Martin's undying loyalty to Horatio Johnson on its head. It involves Horatio's uncle, who lives in Texas, and a visit Horatio and Brittany paid him shortly after Horatio was paroled.
Horatio introduced him to Brittany, stating, this is the girl I love, this is the girl I'm going to marry.
When she walks off and is out of earshot, Horatio says, man, I don't love that girl. That girl's stupid. That girl's gullible. I'm just using her. I'll never marry her.
The prosecution provides a copy of the uncle's statement to Brittany's defense attorney.
At this point, she's been arraigned. She's no longer with her son. She's not seeing her mother, and she's still standing by Horatio.
I said, Brittany, y'all will get married. She said, yeah, Mr. David. As soon as this is all over, he and I are gonna get married. We already talked about it. We might move to Houston.
That's when Brittany's attorney shows her the statement from Horatio's uncle.
So she picks up the report and she starts reading. And I could see her eyes well up with tears. She's about to cry. Then she put the paper down. She said, he won't play me, huh? Call those people. I won't tell them the real story.
The breaking point was when she realized Horatio didn't love her back. Brittany's lovely, she's an intelligent woman, she's a beautiful woman, but the moment she found out he didn't actually love her, that's when everything broke. I don't think she wants to admit to how weak she had to be to fall for something of that level. It's something that I think it's very hard for anyone to accept. To accept that you're willing to sacrifice your life, know that 2 other people have been killed. That's something I can't imagine reconciling in my own mind.
Brittany Martin and Horatio Johnson have each been charged with second-degree murder in the drowning deaths of Lakeitha and Kenneth Joseph. Hoping she'll turn on her man, the prosecution presents Brittany's attorney with evidence that suggests Horatio may have been playing Brittany all along.
Her eyes got very watery. She was reading the report, and then she put the paper down. She said, call those people. I won't tell them the real story.
Just like I suspected, I got a call, and they were ready to talk. We flipped her against essentially the love of her life. Hell hath no fury like a woman's call.
Brittany finally reveals the events that led to the murders of Kenneth and Lakeitha Joseph.
Brittany got a call from Horatio asking her to come meet him at the studio.
Did you say a reason why to come over there?
No, he just asked me to stop by because I was in the area.
When Brittany pulled up, she found Horatio standing outside with Kenneth. Lakeitha was sitting in the van.
Horatio and Kenneth get ready to head into the studio. Horatio asked me to go and speak with Lakeitha, to go introduce myself to her and talk to her for a while.
Kenneth and Horatio went inside the recording studio. Lakeitha and Brittany stayed outside.
We start to talk about just general things. And Horatio comes back out of the studio. So then he says, tell her to come inside.
Brittany says that once she and Lakeitha entered the studio, things took an unexpected turn.
Brittany sees Horatio grab his cousin's wife, put her in a chokehold.
He was choking her, and I started to kind of scream. Then I got out of the studio.
she flees, but she doesn't stop to call 911.
I stopped to like cool off and just relax a bit.
She said she received a couple of phone calls from Horatio, like, baby, just come back, just come back.
And he was like, everything is okay, just come back. And I told him, no, I'm not coming back. But he kept on like, please come back, I want to talk to you. I just need to make sure you're okay, come back.
Horatio told her whatever she needed to hear to make her think it was going to be all right. He smooth talked her and got her to come back.
I pulled up and he asked me if I'm okay.
Brittany says that in the moment, Horatio told her that he loved her, and if she loved him, she'd help him. Desperate to prove her love to Horatio, Brittany obliged.
They go to a major retail store. They're captured on surveillance video.
We see when they're entering into the store, she's staring into his eyes. It's not just simply walking in with us. She's staring up into his eyes longingly.
They purchased what police describe as the murder kit. 2 of these kettlebell weights, the blue nylon rope, gloves that was used in the killing.
Brittany states that she and Horatio then returned to the recording studio. Brittany waited in her car while Horatio went inside.
He stays in there a while, but every now and then he'll come outside and look at the door to make sure I was still outside parked waiting, because he told me to sit right here, don't leave.
She sees Horatio, Stephen Bradley, and Blue carrying a large object to the van. And then they go back inside, and then they come out with another large object and put that in the van.
From your vantage point, could you tell me what those items were?
I couldn't see, but I know it was definitely heavy.
Detectives surmised that these objects were the Josephs, who had been beaten unconscious.
They get the bodies from the recording studio. They say, hey, come and get in the car. And Horatio's like, you gotta be stupid, I'm not riding with those bodies.
Brittany claims that at that point, Stephen Bradley and Blue drove away in the van. Horatio got in the car with Brittany and told her to follow them.
Brittany says she follows that van from Metairie into New Orleans, out towards Chalmette. When they pulled up on top of the bridge, Horatio told her to stop the car.
And he got out of the car, went to the edge of the bridge, up over the bridge. He stood there for a while.
Based on Brittany's statement, prosecutors believe Stephen Bradley and Blue dumped the bodies of the Josephs off the bridge while Horatio looked on from a distance.
He's there, but he doesn't dump them. Horatio involves himself just enough and makes other people play a special role.
We had doctors who testified that they died from drowning. So to spend your last moments, your last waking moments underwater, tied up across with somebody that you love, and you can do nothing, that has to be one of the worst ways to die. It is incredibly frightening.
Brittany says that a few minutes later, Horatio got back in the car and they continued driving.
He told me to flick my lights. The van was like waiting for him. The van starts up, they go off first, and I was behind them.
Brittany's statement allows prosecutors to move forward with their case against Horatio Johnson. And on August 22, 2017, his trial gets underway.
Brittany was still in love with this person, but I think she decided to just take a stand against Horatio. And so Ms. Martin testified.
Horatio Johnson was found guilty as charged of second-degree murder. He was ultimately sentenced to a mandatory life sentence plus 60.
Stephen Bradley and his uncle Frank Mike Jr. are both convicted of obstruction of justice.
Stephen Bradley is currently serving a 35-year prison sentence.
Frank Mike received 9 years in Department of Corrections.
The owner of the recording studio, the man known as Blue, remains on the run. There is still a warrant out for his arrest in connection with this case. As for Brittany Martin, in exchange for testifying against her man, she is given a 10-year sentence for obstruction of justice.
I don't think that we could have been successful in this case without her assistance. Brittany was our key witness in this case.
One thing that really never came out in trial was the motive for this killing. How this couple could be murdered in such a brutal way by a cousin, what could have precipitated that?
We heard it was rumored to be about drugs and money.
But prosecutors and police never really were able to uncover any evidence of that.
Though the motive behind the crime may forever be shrouded in mystery, one thing is certain. Brittany Martin's blind devotion to Horatio Johnson cost Kenneth and Lakeitha Joseph their lives.
The only person that could have actually helped didn't, and that was Brittany. How could you watch the man you love do this to someone else? How?
She failed to take some action. She could have called 911, and maybe those two individuals might still be alive. But she didn't. She was bit by the love bug.
She was in love with Horatio Johnson. He had some kind of control over her that made her stay quiet for so long.
Even though her life was changing, that night, it only took for him to look her in the eye and say, "Baby, it's gonna be all right." And she believed him.
We all surrender to love at some point in our lives. But sometimes, giving in completely to those emotions can find us in over our heads. Like a rip current, that love grabs hold. And the harder you fight, the quicker you're pulled under. You're drowning. And no one's there to save you. Least of all, the one you love. Every woman wants to be the center of their man's world, to be doted on, loved, and lavished. But what if you aren't the only woman who wants it from your man? What if you have competition, and the competition's fierce? Sometimes you have to go to great lengths to stay on top. When you're not the only one, what would you do to stay number one? March 2011. Cherry Hill, New Jersey. The upscale suburb is bustling with morning commuters.
Cherry Hill is right on the borderline of Philadelphia.
I would describe it as a swanky area.
You may have a neighbor with a brand new Mercedes-Benz, but you have one too.
Over on the southeast side of the city, police are surveilling a local shipping store.
We received an anonymous tip.
They found out that there was going to be a large package of cocaine that would be coming through.
Earlier that day, police discovered 2 large packages of drugs that had been shipped to the store under what seemed to be a fake name.
Each package contains 4 kilograms of cocaine. Kilogram is valued somewhere between like $30,000 and $40,000 a piece.
Police had the clerk wrap the packages back up and were now laying in wait to see who would arrive to claim them.
We put one of our detectives in the store with them in an undercover capacity, just to have one closer set of eyes on whoever might be coming in there to pick up these packages.
Police worry the perp has caught wind of the sting.
But there wasn't a lot of activity there at all that day. We knew that if it didn't happen that day, that it just wasn't going to happen.
However, a flashy sedan eventually catches the detective's attention. The woman driving the vehicle enters the store and goes straight for the packages.
It was tense, everybody was ready to go.
But just as police think they've got their suspect in their crosshairs, the woman's demeanor changes.
She seemed like she became clued in somehow that something was up, that she was being watched.
The woman abruptly leaves the store empty-handed, but police believe they're onto something.
We had a pretty good assessment that she was involved in this.
They're very suspicious of this woman.
After their suspect drives off, detectives go inside the shipping store to make contact with their undercover colleague and the store clerk. What the clerk tells them will spearhead the entire investigation.
The clerk recognized her. She came in all the time with her boyfriend. Right away, he said, "That's Flippa's girl."
Jamaican immigrant Marsha Bernard had moved to the U.S. to break into the music scene.
Marsha had a deep passion for music and for dance, and actually hoped to be a part of that world.
She actually could imagine her life being exactly what she saw in the music videos.
One night, Marsha went out to see a popular dance hall performer who also hailed from Jamaica, 24-year-old Andrew Davis, aka Flippa Mafia.
Dance hall is very important to Jamaican culture. It's how people express themselves through dance and music.
Marsha loved how Flippa was a natural on stage.
When he stood on stage, the crowd just went crazy.
We're talking about a man who would come to his concerts with bags of money, and he would throw money out to the crowd.
Marsha was beautiful, so beautiful that she caught Flippa's eye as he performed.
Flippa was so intrigued by Marsha that he brought her up on stage.
He reaches out and grabs Marsha. That's the grounds for something magical to happen.
I would imagine in Marsha's experience, it must have been so exciting to be chosen by this person and to be shown that affection and desire in front of everyone.
She was in a position that a lot of the other women probably would have wanted to be in. She was the queen of the dance hall, at least at that moment.
The excitement that you get from that, from all of those eyes on you and everyone watching you. He's pulling me up on stage. He's directing all of his desire towards me. You all see it.
It gives you a rush. It makes you feel exhilarated.
As the weeks went on, Marsha became a staple on Flippa's arm, sharing the spotlight with him in the dance halls. And it wasn't long before their public chemistry transferred to the bedroom.
He was representing a part of something that she loved. She loved dance hall. She loved, the Jamaican culture and the music. She definitely craved him.
Flippa saw that and took advantage of that.
Flippa showed her attention. He demonstrated what deep down inside she desired from a man.
Flippa had all the words, all the things to tell her to make her feel good. He made her feel sexy.
Marsha quickly moved into Flippa's swanky condo, and the two lived a life of luxury.
Diamonds and pearls and clothes and shoes. She had that at her fingertips.
Marsha was buying the best of the best cars, designer outfits, designer bags, shoes, not only to align herself with him and his lifestyle, but to also make sure that all the other women around him saw that and recognized her top woman status.
Marsha made sure that when she came out, she was the eye candy that everybody was looking at.
By the late 2000s, not only had the couple's wealth and status skyrocketed, but their family had also grown.
They had 2 children. She was a good mother.
Now she has a family that she also loves. Marsha really believed that her relationship with Flippa was the relationship of her dreams.
The Jamaican beauty had a life of riches and love. But little did she know that being Flippa's girl required more than met the eye. March 2011. In Cherry Hill, New Jersey, police have just surveilled a woman they believe to be connected to a large cocaine shipment.
They found $160,000, worth of drugs in 2 packages, and they wanted to bust the person whose drugs they were.
Though the woman had left without touching the packages, the clerk seemed to recognize her.
He said she was Flipper's girl.
I said, who's Flip? He says, his name's Flipper Mafia. He's a DJ. He's like a dance hall artist. He said, just look him up. So literally, I'm taking my phone out, and here pops a picture of Andrew Davis, aka Flipper Mafia.
They see Flipper, and right there beside him is the woman who had just left the store. They learned she was 29-year-old Marsha Bernard.
Little did detectives know that they had just stumbled into a world of music and glamour, wrapped up in a massive drug operation of international proportions.
People thought it was just the music, but it was a shock to everyone that he was in other illegal activities.
In the spring of 2011, Marsha Bernard and her DJ boyfriend, Andrew Davis, aka Flipper Mafia, were living the high life in Cherry Hill, New Jersey.
Flipper brought Marsha to that world. He was very lavish, and not just on the spending of his own, but his ability to shower her with gifts and with money.
They were living it up. He was showing off what he had earned as a part of dancehall life, and Marsha was his girl.
The power couple had an exclusive condo where they raised their 2 children.
It is about the life. It was about the glamour for Flipper and Marsha.
She sees him in those roles as a father, a protector, but also provider. She's used to a certain, lifestyle, and it can only get better from there.
With her man by her side, Marsha felt like she was living the dream. But little did she know, her world of glitz and glam would soon come crashing down around her. March 2011. Cherry Hill police believe that Andrew Davis, also known as renowned Jamaican dancehall artist Flipper Mafia, and his girlfriend, 29-year-old Marsha Bernard, are connected to 2 confiscated packages holding over $160,000 of cocaine.
Police had surveilled Flipper's girlfriend, and it looked like she was about to come pick up a package. But she felt kind of uneasy, thinking that the police were maybe watching her, so she left.
So ultimately, the day ends with no one coming back to pick up those packages. The packages just get logged in evidence.
Back at the station, detectives continue looking into Flipper and Marsha.
We get to the point of getting court authorization to conduct this wiretap phase of the investigation. We learned from the phone conversations that we had that this is a significant drug distribution organization.
It was clear that Flipper was running an organization that was bigger than the police thought. Flipper was thought to have moved millions of dollars worth of drugs in his states.
We'd also learned that Marsha played a much more significant role than we thought. You would hear somebody say, "Shoot me an address." And then you'd get a follow-up call to Marsha saying, "Hey, it's shipped."
But as detectives prepared to move in on their suspects, they received some unfortunate news.
They found out that Flipper had left the country in the middle of the night. He had gone back to Jamaica. They thought that he was probably feeling the heat and decided to get out of the country to lay low.
Once he was in Jamaica, the concern was, is he ever coming back?
It seemed the drug kingpin has left Marsha to carry on business as usual in his absence.
They overhear this call from Flippa to Marsha from Jamaica about a huge delivery of drugs.
Flippa had instructed Marsha to go meet this individual, Devon Grant. He actually said, bring him one. We understood one to mean 1 kilo of cocaine.
After the shipping store went bust, the police are hoping that this is their opportunity to finally catch them red-handed.
On the day of the sting, police follow Marsha to a parking lot behind a local restaurant. Detectives stand by as Marsha gets out of her vehicle and meets with Devon.
She gave them a shopping bag, at which point in time we can see that something was being done in the front passenger side of this car.
Detectives radio their backup and waste no time in apprehending the pair of suspects.
She was more in shock than anything else.
She was very scared. I would imagine that she felt her world was crumbling down all around her.
This was a mom. This was somebody who was involved in this life, but never once expected to be in this situation, and in my opinion was very fearful of what was going to happen next.
When detectives confiscate the shopping bag, their suspicions are confirmed.
Inside there was a kilo of cocaine. Obviously the phone conversations are very strong evidence, but the drugs that we had seized was probably the most significant piece of evidence.
Detectives also find a receipt inside the package, bearing Marsha's name.
We find that bag, but we found a receipt in that bag with her name on it. How could you explain away that we have this receipt attached to this kilo of cocaine?
That receipt was their ticket to say, we got her.
But Marsha Bernard isn't the big fish detectives are interested in. They want Flippa, and they hope Marsha is the key to catching him once and for all.
They had Marsha, but what they wanted was Kingpin. They were hoping that she was going to flip on him.
When detectives sit down with Marsha, they hope the mother of two will come clean. But getting her to open up will be easier said than done.
She built up this, I am Flippa's woman, I am his everything, so now you have to prove that.
She was willing to maintain that loyalty for her man at any cost.
Her love for her man was more important to her than saving herself.
New Jersey police have just taken mother of two, Marsha Bernard, into custody after catching her red-handed delivering a large shipment of cocaine.
They believe that she was working for her boyfriend, who was a famous DJ named Flippa Mafia. Detectives believe that Flippa was actually a drug kingpin.
People thought it was just the music. He was in other illegal activities, distribution of drugs and that sort of stuff.
Now that they have Flippa's main lady in custody, detectives are hoping they can persuade her to turn on her man. They begin by laying out the charges she's facing.
Police tell her that they're going to charge her with drug distribution, conspiracy, and money laundering.
Marsha was responsible for the operations of the business on U.S. soil while Flippa was away in Jamaica.
The cocaine was shipped here, and once it would end up with her, she would wait for directions from Flippa as to what to do.
They made offers to her to, give her less time if she would flip on Flippa.
We made it clear to her, this is your chance. You're the one sitting here, but he's the one behind all of this. We want for him to be sitting in this chair right now, not you.
Despite the severity of the charges against her, Marsha remains unshakable.
I don't remember her doing anything other than just having this blank stare at me.
This wasn't a situation that she can run from. Her tactic was to freeze. It's safe to just put up that guard and to not engage emotionally.
Detectives try another tactic. They let Marcia know just how well Flippa is doing in Jamaica.
He was being spotted at these different clubs.
He was pouring champagne on women in champagne bubble baths. He was on stage with suitcases of money.
He was shopping, he was doing shows, he was just continuing on with his lifestyle while Marcia was going through the situation in the U.S.
But to detectives' dismay, Marcia still doesn't budge.
Loyalty is a big thing in the Jamaican culture, especially with those who provide for you. It's very important that you are loyal to them.
When you're with the love of your life, you want to preserve that relationship as much as you can. That loyalty comes with that, even if it's misplaced at times.
Detectives cut their losses and end the interview with Marcia.
Instead of getting out on her own and saying, look, I'm not going to take the fall for this, she took the fall.
Even when it was all falling apart, Marcia wanted to do whatever she has to do for her man.
After striking out with Marcia, detectives sit down with Devon Grant, who was arrested with Marcia during the drug bust. But Devon is just as tight-lipped.
He wouldn't budge. He lawyers up immediately. He's not going to tell them anything.
Neither individual wanted to cooperate, so we didn't get much information out of them that day. We didn't learn any more that day that we didn't already know from them.
In the months that pass, police orchestrate a large sting to take down nearly a dozen of Flippa's associates, from the top down. But to their dismay, all remain loyal to their suspected leader.
We had all these drugs, all this money, all these defendants, and for me, wasn't going to really be satisfied with this until he was here.
Finally, in May of 2013, after nearly 2 years of trying to get their main man, detectives get the big break they've been looking for.
They got in custody Leanna Bishop, who was one of the associates of Flippa, and she was willing to talk to the police if she had a deal.
Leanna is one who was very close to Flippa and Marcia.
She was in the inner circle. She had a little bit more information than potentially what everyone else saw.
She was somebody who they utilized her house to store some of this cocaine prior to it being distributed.
When Leanna tells detectives her story, it will turn the case on its head and finally give police some of the answers they've been looking for.
The information she gave was the tipping point that pretty much cracked this case open.
Flippa had other women in his life. Marcia wasn't the only one.
We see that with Marcia. She would just go into herself and maintain that stoic composure. And that is what felt safe for her. Because she has become so enmeshed in her relationship with Flippa, she needs to protect him by any means.
May 2013. New Jersey police have Marcia Bernard and nearly a dozen other associates in custody for their connection to an extensive drug ring run by Marcia's boyfriend, Andrew Davis, aka DJ Flippa Mafia.
We're talking about an international drug ring. It's worth millions of dollars, very intricate network.
The one person they didn't have was Flippa.
They believe Flippa was the mastermind, and Marcia's just doing his bidding.
Flippa was in Jamaica basically calling shots or pulling the strings as to kind of what Marcia was doing.
They needed someone to turn on him so that they could get him charged and back to the United States.
Fortunately, detectives are in luck. An associate of the drug ring who police have in custody, Leanna Bishop, has expressed an interest in cutting a deal.
She was someone who was able to have access to Andrew and Marcia in a more internal way. She was certainly associated with what was going on behind the scenes with the two of them.
Leanna says she'll confess to her role in the ring, as well as detail Marcia and Flippa's roles in exchange for a lighter sentence.
We sat down and gave her kind of the opportunity to tell her side.
Leanna starts from the beginning and explains how Flippa and Marcia went from the dance hall to the drug game.
She knew Flippa and Marcia from back in the day, way before he started his drug business. Back then, everybody saw them as king and queen of the dance hall. They were the perfect couple.
Whenever he did social events, she was right at his side in designer outfits.
However, Leanna claims as time went by, Flippa became unsatisfied with his status and wanted more.
He did have a good following in the States, but it didn't quite compare to his following in Jamaica.
There is that need for consistent praise and for excitement and power, and to not have that as readily available for him in the U.S., that would bring about a sense of urgency to build that identity up here.
Leanna explains that's when Flippa started building his drug empire to make some extra cash and expand his brand.
You keep your money flowing and make it look like it's legal when actually the flow is coming through illegal sources.
Leanna says she was there when Flippa revealed what he had been up to, and she immediately wanted in.
Leanna was storing the drugs in exchange for a cut of the profit. She was in so much debt that she was just looking for a way out.
According to Leanna, Marcia wasn't as enthusiastic about Flippa's new venture into the drug trade.
Marcia was a little uncomfortable with it at first, but Flippa reassured her that it was the best thing for their family.
Marcia believed Flippa. She was so enamored with him that if he said that things were going to be fine, she believed and trusted that.
But Leanna says as the money skyrocketed, so did Flippa's thirst for women. Women other than Marcia.
There was always just an abundance of women around Andrew and wanting his attention, touching his face, dancing on him, singing his praises. He commanded a lot of attention, and he was very comfortable with that. And for Marcia to be on the sidelines and to be experiencing that, she wasn't able to get too comfortable.
Other women would try to also get his attention, and he would actually follow through.
Leanna tells detectives that eventually her own friendship with Flippa began to evolve into something more, and the two began hooking up.
Marcia staying home more with the kids at this point. That left an opening on Flippa's arm when he was out at the clubs.
Leanna explains that despite Flippa's attempts to keep his extramarital affairs on the down low, Marcia started to notice a change in him.
The dynamic of the relationship changes, and the love becomes a little bit more intermittent.
She felt insecure. She didn't feel special.
It would begin to possibly sow some seeds of insecurity.
She always had an awareness that she could be replaced. And so there is that desire to do whatever it is that I have to do to get that love again.
Leanna recalls that in a blatant effort to win back Flippa's affection, Marcia began taking a bigger role in the drug ring.
Marcia was prepared to go all in. She wanted to continue to be that number one.
That's where you see the values changing. She's gonna do whatever it is that he needs for her to do.
But regardless of Marcia's devotion, Leanna admits she and Flippa continued their affair.
Leanna had fallen completely under Flippa's spell, just like Marcia.
Detectives are floored. With Leanna's statement in tow, they decide to take another crack at Marcia. Now, armed with the truth of his infidelity, they think she'll finally turn on her man.
You could tell that it definitely upset her.
She's feeling anger, she's feeling resentment, sadness, fear, all of these things.
May 2013. Leanna Bishop, longtime friend of Marcia Bernard and Andrew Flippa Mafia Davis, has just confessed to her role in their international drug operation.
She was storing the drugs at her house and performing quality control checks on the drugs.
Leanna has admitted to detectives that she was also having an affair with Flippa, unbeknownst to Marcia.
So for Leanna, she was the other woman, and Marcia was the common law wife. Marcia and Flippa, they were together. They had lived together, they had kids together.
With Leanna's testimony in tow, detectives take another crack at Marcia.
Police tell Marcia everything Leanna said about the affair.
The woman was a friend of Marcia's. She was someone that she saw all the time, someone who was intertwined in their lives.
To double down on Leanna's statement, detectives play recordings of the wiretaps from Flippa's associates.
There's a conversation where they refer to Flippa's girlfriend. One of the individuals says, "Who, Marcia?" And she goes, "Oh no, the other one." You're watching the look on her face, so you could tell that it definitely upset her.
But just when detectives think they've finally convinced Marcia to flip on her two-timing man, she shocks them yet again.
Despite the insurmountable evidence that the police have given Marcia in this investigation room, she decides to stand by her man.
A lot of us will never understand, but love makes you do stuff that doesn't often make sense to people.
She completely and fully immersed herself in every aspect of who Flippa was, even at the detriment of her freedom, even at the breakup of her family, and even at the detriment of not being able to care for her children.
Back inside her jail cell, Marcia receives no solace from Flippa, the man she's risking her life to save.
She's sitting behind bars alone, and he doesn't even have the decency to reach out.
He basically tried to completely eliminate any ties that he had to any of the people. His girlfriend, the mother of his children, is in jail, and he's sitting in Jamaica, essentially free from all of this.
With Marcia, Leanna, and Flippa's other associates awaiting trial, detectives concentrate on nabbing their kingpin. And finally, in September of 2013, they get a promising tip.
I start getting phone calls that, people had been spotting him in different nightclubs.
Flippa was back in the States, and he couldn't keep out of the limelight.
Him being an entertainer, you're competing with other dancehall artists. You want that top spot. I guess he decided to take that chance to hit the stage.
Police stake out the clubs where Flippa has recently been spotted, hoping they'll finally get their man.
He was always one step ahead of them. They could never locate him.
But when detectives start looking outside of the box, They find another possible way to nab Flippa.
The thing about drug dealers, it's always about the car they drive. It's flashy, but it's custom. Flippa had a few cars, of course.
Reach out to a dealership and give them the description of the car. We said his name's Andrew Davis. That guy says he just called here 2 hours ago and said that he's looking to trade the car in and get something new.
Because he is at that larger than life level. He's feeling untouchable.
Marcia and Flippa, they have to be lucky every single move that they make. For us, sometimes we only have to be lucky once.
When Flippa arrives at the dealership to make the exchange, police are there waiting for him.
They made the arrest, and very quietly, he went with the officer.
He was respectful. When he was arrested, we felt great. I don't know that I'll ever catch another break like that.
Back at the station, detectives finally sit down face to face with Flippa. They lay out the mountain of evidence against him in hopes that he'll come clean.
We had the drugs that we had seized, the wiretap conversations, the information from some of the other defendants.
The detectives presented Flippa with Leanna's statement.
But Flippa won't budge.
He says, I have a lawyer, I don't want to talk to you guys. Okay, no problem. And that was it.
With Flippa staying silent, detectives prepare for trial. But soon, Flippa's loyal fan club pleads guilty. Everybody except one.
I knew once that trial started that she was in it for the long haul.
Marcia was facing 21 years in jail, had this mountain of evidence against her. And instead of saving herself and telling the police what they wanted to know in terms of Flippa's participation in this drug ring, she decided she was going to stay faithful and loyal to her man. And you kind of wonder what kind of love makes you do that, but I guess it's the kind of love she felt.
October 27th, 2015. 4 years after detectives intercepted their first package, the trial for drug kingpin and dancehall star Flippa Mafia is almost underway.
They decided to try Marcia Bernard, his girlfriend, mother of 2 of his children, alongside him.
We made a decision to try them both together. From a prosecution standpoint, you couldn't tell the story of one without the other.
Devon and Leanna had pleaded guilty for lesser sentences, whereas Marcia and Flippa decided they would take it up with the jury.
While waiting outside the courtroom, Marcia finally comes face to face with Flippa for the first time in 2 years.
The tension between the two of them was palpable. I mean, you could feel it.
They would sit right next to each other and never even acknowledge each other at all.
Though Marcia never speaks, it's clear that her thoughts are spiraling.
She was taking a good long look at her life and asking herself, how did I get here?
She was very scared, very nervous.
As for Flippa, he sits there emotionless.
For Flippa to be stoic, he had to know that he was in really big trouble.
Once everyone has taken their seat inside the courtroom, the trial begins. Prosecutors lay out damning evidence against the couple, including the wiretaps and witness statements.
He would direct people to get a shipment together. He would then call Marcia and let her know that a shipment was on the way, and he would tell her who specifically to call and tell her, to be there.
He was able to maintain that control by frequent phone calls.
She ran the show for him in the United States, but she didn't do anything without being told by him to do it.
After the prosecution rests, Flippa's attorney starts to distance him from any wrongdoing.
He said, remember, Marcia was here actually running the enterprise while he was in Jamaica. And so you consider yourself not being a part of it. I got clean hands. I wasn't there. Marcia was there. She used the money that I had. She did what she wanted to do.
As for Marcia's attorney, he takes a different approach.
Her attorney has only one good defense. She had no priors. Usually those are reasons to give her some leniency.
Despite the defense's protestations, it only takes the jury a couple of hours to return with a verdict. Marcia and Flippa are found guilty.
They were each convicted on the drug distribution and the money laundering.
For his role as the kingpin, Flippa is handed a hefty sentence.
Flippa had one sentence, one 25-year sentence.
He isn't even eligible for parole until the year 2025.
As for Marcia, she is sentenced to 21 years for being Flippa's right hand in the drug ring.
She was very upset because I don't think she thought that she was going to be leaving her children, not coming back that day.
They wanted to make sure that Marcia was going to be punished for being willing to maintain this loyalty by any means for her man. She was made an example of.
As Marcia and Flippa serve out their sentences behind bars, Marcia's parents take custody of the couple's children.
Her parents took the children back to Jamaica.
And though she will be out one day to reunite with her kids, one can only wonder if she regrets not only her actions, but her final decision.
Had it not be for her relationship with him, she probably wouldn't have been involved in anything like this.
Love is a very dynamic feeling. You can't just turn it off just like that.
She lost everything for this man that she loved and that she trusted to provide her with safety and love, not only for herself, but for her children. She became completely enmeshed and followed this man blindly in the belief that he was gonna provide for her the life that she needed, and it all did come crashing down.
There's no better feeling than when you make it to the top and become the only woman your man desires. But keeping his attention isn't always as easy as it seems. And that number one spot can be ripped from you in the blink of an eye. When your perfect world implodes, the fall from the top is a long way down.